Fifth time's the charm. Hello, hi there, everybody. Welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Discourses, returning us to the Discourses of Machiavelli. We've been focusing on book two of the Discourses, and now we're today looking at chapter 9. Chapter 9 is going to deal with the question of, as he says right here, what causes commonly make wars arise among powers. So in other words, the last chapter really dealt with the question of invading people leaving their own homeland to take over people of others. And he says, in other words, and then he said that he's dealt with wars of aggression. The earlier chapter about the nature of Rome and other people. In other words, there's two types of war. He says that there's wars that republics or princes republics do to expand their empire. This is the Roman example, but this is also implies also the example of Alexander, right? Empire making. And then the other kind of wars is the wars of powers, right? Which he doesn't talk about. Now he talks about it now, today in chapter 9. Because the last chapter he didn't go into this, he doesn't proceed orderly here. He gives us first the Roman example. Then he says, well, okay, there's two ways. There's the Roman and then there's the ordinary wars. But I'm going to talk about invading populations. Because he had to deal with that, explaining the problems the Romans had. The great wars that really endangered the Romans was the Gallic invasion, right? Those are the two wars that really invaded, that just really existentially threatened that, and explained that. Now, today we're going to be dealing with, in chapter 9, ordinary wars. What are the reasons why people make wars among powers, right? The cause that make wars arise between the Romans and the Samnites, who had been in league for a great time, is a common cause that arises among all powerful principalities. That cause either comes about by chance or is made to arise by whoever desires to start the war. In other words, it's two reasons: chance or there's an intentionality, right? But this is what happens, a common situation between powerful states, powerful principalities, right? That which arose between the Romans and the Samnites was by chance. For the intention of the Samnites in starting the war against the Sindaci and then against the Campanians was not to start it against the Romans, right? Again, this is a Livy 7:29-32. They waged those wars not to start a war with Rome, but they had their reason. They had that problems there, right? They didn't want to do it to Romans. But when the Campanians were crushed and had recourse to the Romans, contrary to the expectation that of the Romans and of the Samnites, since the Campanians gave themselves to the Romans, they were forced to defend them as a thing of their own, and to take on a war that it seemed to them they could not escape with honor. In other words, the Campanians surrendered themselves, gave themselves to Rome, and now they had to protect. It's now theirs, and they had to protect. They didn't want to do this, but since this was theirs. And what is this now thing that is theirs has been given to them is now being attacked by the Samnites, and we think you had to defend it. Your honor required it in that sense. It's not that they chose to go to war. And in fact, this is the problem. This is the famous reason Texas and the story of Mexico and the Texas and the Mexican Revolution that failed, and then the move of Texas independence in the 1830s. This led to the Texas independence. The independent Texas army defeats the Mexican military, captures Santa Anna, make them sign the Treaty of Guadalupe. I forget the name of the treaty offhand. But then when he goes back, the Mexicans refuse to do it. So what should have been the treaty line was the Rio Grande River. But the the Texans really didn't control. The Mexicans controlled up to a different river above, much interior. So when Texas became they didn't control that land. Very similar to how Ukraine doesn't control the land on the eastern borders in Crimea. Okay, but this is a difference. This is not their independence. Their independence, it's a much more complicated problem because it was during the independence treaty that did it. Then the Mexicans didn't recognize it. So when the Texas Republic in the 1840s become a state, the land claim of Texas now became the American land claim. So the American government sent the American cavalry to go patrol the American border. The Mexicans, thinking this was Mexican territory, attacked the the U.S. military, and hence, the Mexican War. It was a good. I could say this was planned by the Americans because they wanted they wanted a cause, because they tried buying California from the Mexicans, and the Mexicans kept on saying no. So they wanted a cause to grab California from the Mexicans. And by attacking, this was a cause belli. Again, so why I'm bringing this example of American history for this point? Because this is the point that Machiavelli says, that there is a reason. This is what happened here. That the Samites attacked something that incorporated into Rome or became owned by Rome. And now they didn't plan to go to war with America. Mexico didn't plan to go to war with America. But this is how it happened, right? For it seemed quite reasonable to the Romans that they could not defend the Campanites as friends against their friends, the Samites. But it seemed to them quite a shame not to defend them as subjects or truly as clients. In other words, they had to choose. They had to either defend them or, they're subjects or clients, right? For they judged that if they did not take on such a defense, it would shut the way to all those who might plan to come under their powers. In other words, those who would agree to this. In other words, they would, by not helping them, as they would say, come into power, this would be a negative example. So by doing this paved the road so lesser powers would put themselves under Roman protection, and therefore increase the ability of Rome to get control over subjects, right? That we might have come to under their power, right? Since Rome had as its end empire and glory, not quiet, it could not reject this enterprise. In other words, the goal was empire. The Romans wanted empire. They didn't want quiet. Their leadership was ambitious. They're ambitious, and the people, they needed land, right? They needed to be able to send colonies off. So therefore, the empire was the means that the Romans sought. It was not quiet in that sense. The same cause gave a beginning to the first war against the Carthaginians, through the defense the Romans undertook of the Mysileans in Sicily, which was also by chance, right? Again, the Livy summaries, Limerys and the summaries, book 16, and Polybius 8 to 12, right? 18 to 2, books 18 to 12, I think, book 1. I don't know. I think there's an error in that reference. So Polybius history, book, So therefore, it was, but it was not again by chance that the second war arose between them. In other words, first was by chance. The second war was not by chance. For Hannibal, the Carthaginian captain, assaulted the Saguntines, the friends of Rome in Spain, not to offend them, but to start up the Roman arms and have the opportunity to combat them and pass into Italy. Right. This is again Livy 21. 5 through 19. So, in other words, he starts a war knowing that the Romans will have to fight him, and then once they defeat the Roman army, he will go into Italy by crossing the Alps, right? This mode of setting off new wars has always been customary among the powerful, with some respect, both for faith and for others. In other words, who have some respect both for faith and for each other. In other words, you have to have it. In other words, you don't do it for. In other words, you have respect of faith, good faith, and for each other. You respect the other powers. So therefore, you start a war not in the way of either by accident or by you're forced because this you're forced in a kind of by necessity by pursuing your goal and pursuing your end. Your interest is now is this, and then therefore all of a sudden the other power interest oppose, and that if you don't do this, this will really harm your interest. So therefore you're forced to go to war in that sense. Necessity compels you to do this to secure your interests. So this is why what does this in that sense, and it's not. In other words, it's. And this is why and because of respect for I respect that power. I know if I don't do, they will win that, and I will lose the people. If I don't defend that people, and as who threaten that, no other powers will turn to depend on me, and I want to keep on going. Okay, so therefore I need to do this, right? The same thing with the. In other words, that. Carthaginian went to war with that, knowing that that the Romans would attack, and then once they attack, he would defeat them and start being able to move into Italy, passing them into Italy. So this is the way the modes of starting new wars has always become customary among powerful things. They respect for faith, keeping one word and the rules of how we do things, and to each other, powerful, because of the other powerful. For if I wish to make war with a prince, and solid treaties have been observed between us for a great time, I will, with more justification and more color, assault a friend of his than himself. In other words, I'm not going to attack him. I have a treaty with you. I have a treaty with you. I have a treaty with you. And we've had what? It's been observed for a great period of time. So I'm not going to go attack you. I'm going to attack a friend of yours. And knowing that you will probably defend him, I will have my war with you. Okay, that's just how Machiavelli does this. I will, with more justification and more color, assault a friend of his than himself. For I know especially that if I assault his friend, either he will resent it, and I will have my intention of making war with him, or by not resenting it, he will uncover his weakness or faithlessness in not defending a client of his. So it's a lose-lose situation. I attack, and then I reveal my war. You will have to come to fight with me. I get what I'm war. Or if I don't defend them, I show my weakness to my friends and allies. And my faithfulness, I promise to protect you, not protecting you. Both the one and the other of these two things are able to take away his reputation and to make my plans easier. In other words, either way, either one of these things, I either one or the other. Either he doesn't. He kind of. He goes to war with me. Okay, we were peaceful friends. Okay, that hurts reputation. Was warlike, and the other, but faithful. There was this idea. But the other one is his weakness or his faithlessness. In other words, that's the two things he says: weakness or faithlessness. Weakness or faithlessness. In other words, I may not be weak, but I just don't. I don't want to do it. So weakness and faithlessness, both these two things are able to take away his reputation and make my plans easier, right? From the surrender of the Campians should thus be noted what is said about starting a war. And further, what remedy a city has that cannot defend itself by wishing to defend itself by every mode the one who assaults you. In other words, okay, this is, I don't know how they're calling, because that's supposed to be dead. That's supposed to be dead. You know, this is hilarious. Well, hold on. My throat. So, again, let's repeat this line. He says, from the surrender of the Campians, thus should be noted that it was above about starting a war, right? The Campians, they surrendered to the Campians, right? Because that they knew that the Samians, they were going to, by surrendering, what is that? And further, that a city, what remedy a city has that cannot defend itself? Consent defend itself by itself, but wishes to defend itself by every mode from one who assaults it. Right? I don't want them to get us, them to defeat us. So that is to give yourself freely to one who you plan should defend you, as the Coplands did to the Romans, and the Florentines to King Roberts of Naples, who, not wishing to defend them as friends, then defended them as subjects against the forces of Castorecolo of Lusa, who was crushing them. So therefore the first is the Capians, right? The example of this is Livy 4 and that. And then the Florentine Histories, book 2, the other ones. The examples of how the Florentines submit themselves to Robert, of King of Naples. Why? Because he wouldn't defend them as friends, but as subjects, he would go against the forces of Castillo of Luca, right? Who was crushing them. This guy was crushing the Florentines. And since he was not going to come to the friends, but he would defend him as subjects. So, you use it. That's the strategy you use to survive. Weak powers use to survive. Weak powers will appeal to submit themselves, surrender themselves, or give their interests away to stronger powers who could defend them against other strong powers that they by themselves cannot defeat. That is the classic example here. So let's stop. This is the standard way of powers, how powers behave to each other, he says. We'll stop here. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and I will respond to them when I see them, and I'll give you some comment or some things, or address what you ask. Another thing is, if you like the videos, hit the like videos. Please hit like. Again, and if you liked it, please share it on your, if not on social media, then on different, emails to your friends, email to people that who are interested. Bring it to their attention. Share it far and wide. Then, if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Please encourage other people to check out the channel. Come check the channel out. Watch the other videos we've done on the Prince and other authors that we've covered in length. And come subscribe. You get notifications. Now, why do you do this? By commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing. What you do is you impact the algorithm that both Google, Alphabet, and remember that YouTube is part of Alphabet, utilize in their algorithms for searching. And therefore, people searching wanting to find about Machiavelli's and Discourses, the more you like, the more people hear, more people subscribe, the more likely this will come to up on the list. If you didn't like it, you thought something was wrong, you can always thumbs down it, but say why in the comments so people can benefit. Those who watch this can give the reason for why you're saying this and what I did wrong or said wrong, or you say I say something incorrectly, or I misrepresented what is being said here, and that way people can benefit from it. Okay, as we're doing this not to win friends and influence people, but rather to understand this great text of Machiavelli. Another thing you do is you want to follow me on social media. The social media links are below. If you want to know more about me as a researcher, a scholar, an academic, and check out my scholarship and stuff like that, you can check out the academic social media beneath the social media links. And if you want to help me to do what I do, you want to help me contribute directly, you can do so through monetary help. You can do so through Subscribestar or Patreon. It will help. I would very appreciate more people did this, but I understand why people don't, because I'm doing this anyway. So this is the tragedy of the comments, right? I'm doing something that I normally will do anyways, and therefore, so why should I pay for something that he's going to do anyways? And maybe I don't value it that much, It was, again, it would be useful. Or you can buy one of my books that are listed below. You can do so at your local books. The books that are hard published, you can buy so at your local bookstore. Maybe or ask them order it. If they can't order it or are unwilling to order it, you can go or you don't like the bookstore for some reason, you can order it through an online distributor like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Libris, Book Depository, and such, or through or directly to the publisher themselves. The ebook. I'm giving the ebooks available at Kindle things, but I give you the link to the publisher to them. So therefore, those does, and that's it. That's we'll look at next chapter. Next time we meet, we'll look at the next chapter. I think chapter 10, and that will be it. Let's take care and have a good day. Bye bye.